Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast. Today, I am joined by our Natural Super Kids naturopath, Sarah Worbys. Again, hello, Sarah.
Hey, Jess. Good to be here.
So good to be chatting. And today we're talking about all things gut microbiome and gut microbiome testing. So it is a huge topic. For people who might not have heard you on the podcast before, do you want to just tell us a little bit about you and your role here at Natural Super Kids?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the naturopath, consulting naturopath, and been with Natural Super Kids for a few years now. And I do a few other jobs in the club, so member support, writing some resources like the cheat sheets, and consult between Tuesdays and Thursdays every week.
Beautiful. And you have been on the podcast a number of times. We'll link back to other podcast episodes we have done because I can't think of, I didn't look at the numbers, the podcast numbers that you've been on before. But if anyone listening wants to hear more about Sarah, you've been on sharing, case studies and that sort of thing before. So I'll make sure that's all linked in the show notes. But as I said, today we're talking about the gut microbiome and gut microbiome testing. So can you start with what you think is some helpful information for people to know about the gut microbiome and gut microbiome testing? Big question.
And I guess I just want to open by saying that it is a big field, and even within the practitioner world, there's a lot of questions about best testing, what's the most reliable forms of testing. So if you are, a parent wanting to understand the microbiome, just understand it is a big area, and it's a constantly evolving field as well, with research, especially over the last 10 years around the microbiome has exploded, and testing on the back of that is just evolving as well. But there's definitely some, what we understand now, some different types of testing and how they work with, picking up different bacteria and gut environments. So the one that Brad talked about on the podcast with you is the shotgun metagenomics, and that does seem to be a very reliable form of testing, which is a DNA testing the bacteria. So I would say that that's probably the most reliable form at the moment. Over the, last 10 to 20 years, a lot of testing, comprehensive digestive stool analysis was based around culture testing. The main disadvantage with this is that different bacteria grow in different cultures. So it may not necessarily give you an accurate representation of what's happening in the microbiome, because if you pick a particular culture to grow a bacteria, that may be good for one bacteria but not for another.
Yes,
so it's not
true.
The DNA is more reliable in that way.
And it's come a long way, hasn't it, the testing? I mean, I remember when I was practicing regularly, I used to do a lot of that comprehensive, stool analysis testing. And I mean, the more recent microbiome testing, the DNA testing, wasn't even available. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it doesn't mean the culture test, there still are positives to that kind of testing, and it can still show you imbalances and highlight, different things going on in the gut. But the metagenomics seems to be a bit more reliable. And then the PCR test is another DNA test, but that's specifically looking for pathogens. And you may have had one from your GP, like a fecal PCR test. So they are reliable as well, but they're quite narrow in what, well, they are narrow in what they're looking for and picking up on, but still can be useful.
Yeah, and we often recommend a PCR test from the GP as a first step, don't we, to see if there's anything, really obvious, because it's much more cost effective for the client.
Right.
We'll get into, cost of gut microbiome testing in a moment, but the gut, the more kind of comprehensive gut microbiome testing that we do often refer for, is so much more comprehensive than just that, like, limited scope that a PCR test will, like, the information will give us.
Yeah, that's right. And just another, few points on the microbiome and testing. So, like, we know that optimal gut health is linked to optimal systemic health. The testing really is focusing on not necessarily a particular species, but the whole microbiome and gut environment. And it also just serves as a clue to what's going on. It's not, it may, so it'll give us clues, but may not give us a definitive answer. So if you're looking to really pinpoint and find answers, you may not get that. So it's a part of the whole picture and a really good piece of the puzzle that we can use to, fine-tune therapies and put a more, I guess, pinpointed treatment plan together.
Yes, and I love that point. Like, I think a lot of people can get really focused on one particular test, and it does give us some really helpful insights. But it's not the be all and end all. There's so many other things that we look at as naturopaths, and we'll get into a bit later on, our sort of process for referring for this test. We always recommend an initial consultation first, because a lot of people that think they might need the test or their kids might need the test, it's not the most appropriate test, or, there are some limitations with young kids, for example. So we always want to make sure we have that initial consultation first to really help to pinpoint exactly what test, if any testing, is going to be most appropriate for that particular person, as opposed to just referring for testing and then, having an appointment for the results.
Yeah, definitely. It's really worthwhile having a really good understanding of the child in front of us to see what is going on and what's driving their symptoms.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And I think you were going to also talk
family.
Yes, I'm excited for you to share about this, because I think it's so interesting.
It is. So there's been some really interesting research into showing that people who live together share species, and that includes animals as well. So it's the research has been around the oral microbiome, the skin microbiome, and the gut microbiome. So so people who cohabit, not necessarily family members, but if you're in a share household living with other people, you're likely to share some species with them. So I just find that really fascinating. And infants and mothers in that first 12 months of life, the infants share about 50% of the microbiome shared species with the mother. So that's really fascinating. And then that sort of declines over the years up until about 4. But then there's, people who cohabit, share species. And I think Brad mentioned on his podcast that him and his wife did stool tests, and they shared, well, he became the dominant species or something like that. But I just think it's really interesting. And often when I see a mum in clinic and she's talking about her child, she will often say, oh, they're very similar to me. We've got similar digestive issues, or, similar foods seem to set us off, or we both have a bit of anxiety. So I just wanted to sort of say that, if your child is young, 4 and under, I would consider getting a microbiome test for the mum or the main
Mm,
caregiver, because based on this research, you likely are sharing species. And because of, that the mum, well, mostly is the main caregiver, um, that could help you identify
mm,
what's going on in the gut, because testing a young child is not necessarily, um, I guess, reliable, because
mm.
the gut microbiota changes, and we have different dominant species as children get older. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
such a good point. And I just wanted to kind of elaborate on that, like especially kids under 2, but as you said, even,
Mm,
up until 4 years old. I mean, what we've got to remember about gut microbiome testing is the healthy reference ranges are based on adults. And so when we're testing kids, we're always having to take that into consideration. A child, especially as you said, a young child's gut microbiome does look very different. And that doesn't mean that it's unhealthy in any way. So we do have to take we're careful, like we don't often test in very young children. And when we do test in kids overall, we're always, taking that into consideration.
yeah, that's right, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just find that so interesting, that shared species. I mean, I think about one, how important it is for us as mums to have healthy microbiomes and
Mm,
if we don't, the impact that that can have on our kids. And as you said, we see that all the time in the
yeah.
clients and members that we work with, in terms of kids having similar digestive issues to their
Mm,
parents.
yeah.
And the other thing I think of is all of the shared houses that I lived in my backpacking days.
Yeah.
I mean, we lived in a house in London with, like, I don't know, there was 15 of us or something crazy. It was a big house,
Yeah.
but I think about all the microbiome sharing that would have gone on there.
Yeah. And I think also, like, looking at the microbiome of the parent, I feel like it gives us a little bit of hope that we have some,
Mm,
control over that, which will then have a positive flow on effect to the child. So,
mhm,
supporting the health of your microbiome will have a positive flow on effect to your child. So, that's diet,
mhm.
hygiene, um, environmental, all of those things will affect the microbiome.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's empowering, isn't it? And
Mm,
even if, you've got older children, you looking after your gut microbiome is still going to have a positive influence on, your whole family's
yeah,
microbiome. So another
yeah.
vote for, mums and dads looking after themselves and
Themselves.
their
Yeah,
their gut microbiome.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So tell us a bit more about, when you're working with clients as a clinician, as a naturopath, when do you consider gut microbiome testing?
Yeah, I guess like the first thing is to consider the person in front of me. And like we sort of mentioned before, our initial case taking is very comprehensive. And so usually by the end of that, I'll have a better insight into what's going on, and does this child need further testing? What's the most appropriate testing for this child? So it really is, yeah, and can be in collaboration with the parent as well. Sometimes parents come to me, having heard about microbiome
Mm,
testing and really wanting to go down that path. So there's often, a discussion around that.
mm.
And then having, talking about what are the benefits of testing. Will it help me have a greater insight into, a treatment or supporting
Mm.
this person? So they're all the questions I usually consider around testing.
Yeah, I love that. And like, as practitioners here at Natural Super Kids, we're always asking, in terms of looking at testing a particular person, will the test results, change or guide my treatment plan at all?
Yeah.
Because I think there's, that there's definitely this kind of trend towards maybe over testing in
Yeah.
the naturopathic world, and we're definitely not those kind of naturopaths that test every single client with a particular test. Yes,
Mm.
certain tests can be helpful at different, in different situations.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, we're always looking at that the individual person in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. And so I guess in terms of experience that you've had with testing, some of your clients, can you share some insights that you've gained through gut microbiome testing, that you might not have known without a test?
Mm. Yeah, so I've got a case study here that I wanted to share because whilst I could have assumed what was going
Mhm.
on, it really did help for me to see the test results and go, okay, this is what's going on. Well, as much a part of the picture.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, let's really focus on this, what's shown up in the gut testing, and see if we can get some traction in, symptom relief and getting the child feeling good. So this is probably one of the more complex cases that I've seen in chronic case. So 12-year-old boy presented with chronic hives. So he'd been experiencing daily itching, rashes for 4 years. And this appeared not long after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, so within a few months.
Mm.
We did rule out whether it was the insulin causing an allergic reaction, and it didn't seem to be that. So, um, mum did come to me wondering whether a microbiome test would be good. Um, so we looked into that after the initial treatment plan, and the initial treatment plan included um, supporting his immune system function, reducing inflammation, and just supporting his mood, because understandably he was out of sorts a lot of the time. He was cranky, wasn't sleeping well. I mean, hypos with type 1 diabetes can contribute to that as well.
Mm.
He was also getting leg cramps. He had a number of food sensitivities, which, linked to the gut as well. So there was a lot going on. Um, and then, so we did the gut testing. It did show a few things. So one of the main pathogenic bacteria that showed up was a species that's involved with inflammation and autoimmune conditions. It was
Mhm.
the Klebsiella species. It's also a histamine producer.
Mm.
Um, and it's, yeah, so I guess that was key. I did get excited when I saw that because I was like, okay, we've really got something to work with here.
Yeah.
And also there's some really fantastic herbal medicines that are effective for reducing Klebsiella species.
Mm.
So that was exciting. And then what we also worked on was prebiotics and fiber, supporting the gut environment, the intestinal lining, reducing inflammation, and helping immune system function and regulation. So his intestinal, like a marker IgA, was also really low. So that sort of showed me that his immune system needed support. I mean, it all makes sense.
Mm.
But it just really highlights, and sometimes it's really helpful for the parent to see the results on paper and
Mhm.
know, because as a practitioner, I have an understanding of what I'm trying to do, but it can be really helpful for the parent to see, oh, okay, we're taking this because of this,
Yes.
and we're doing this because of this reason. And it's like, okay. And then somehow it gives people a really solid basis for supporting their child to take the supplements, to be on board, compliance. So it has that flow on effect.
Yeah, it
in
helps
that.
people really understand why they're doing certain
Yeah,
things further
yeah,
than just us explaining, well, we want to improve the microbiome diversity, for example. But if
yeah,
they can see on the test results that microbiome diversity is low, like it's
yeah,
a solid kind of evidence as opposed to us kind of gathering that information from the case taking. I agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then so at our first follow-up after 6 weeks, we hadn't had a huge amount of change in the hives. It was sort of, some days were good, some days weren't. There didn't seem to be a really clear picture of what was the trigger. But he'd had relief in his leg cramping, so he was sleeping better. But I felt like that was actually a pretty good improvement after
Mm.
6 weeks. And then about a few weeks ago, so 4 months into the treatment, Mum emailed me to let me know that he'd had some incredible progress and had some no hives days as well as minimal hives days. So just in terms of treatment length of time
Mm.
and the complexity and of this case, as well as the length of time he'd been suffering, I think 4 months is actually a reasonable time to
Mm.
get some results. So I was so happy to hear that a few weeks ago that he was doing well and had some relief. And so that tells me there's been some shift
Mm.
going on in the gut. There's been some nice healing work. And yeah, that he's feeling better too.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think that case really highlights, that gut skin connection, how the gut
Mm,
can impact the skin, whether it's hives. And I mean, eczema is another one that we're
yeah,
always looking at working on the gut and what is going on in the gut. And understandably, mood and sleep were affected from just the irritation of the
yeah,
hives, but also that case highlights that gut brain connection as well. When we start
mm,
to improve things in the gut, then
mm,
things like sleep and mood and learning and behavior can really improve as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so
Yeah.
yeah, that's that little piece of information, one that you shared, the overgrowth of that Klebsiella. Is that how
Klebsiella, yeah.
yeah. I'm terrible at pronouncing all of these. But yeah, like that you wouldn't have necessarily known that particular part of the, piece of information without the testing, which
Yeah,
which
that's
made the
right.
testing really helpful in this case.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I don't did we talk about earlier like uh, your approach often is to kind of get going with a treatment plan
Mm.
for someone, and you're probably more likely to refer for testing, if there's not the expected progress in terms of that treatment plan.
Yeah, that's right. That is what I normally do.
Mm.
Because there is always something that you can start with. And yeah, that's food, lifestyle, some supplements,
Mm.
gut support, probiotics or nutrients that are really obvious from the initial case taking.
Mm.
And I generally like to give it about 8 weeks on a treatment plan to see what's happening, what's changed, if there's been improvement. And, you know, and I always work in consultation with the parent.
Mm.
If it's something that they just really feel like they would like to investigate, then yes, of course, I'm going to say, let's do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, working in consultation with the parent and seeing how the child responds to the initial treatment informs, like, whether a microbiome test is appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so for anyone listening who is interested in a gut microbiome test, I mean, we've already sort of alluded to this, but can you just explain, how they can go about getting a referral for testing through us at Natural Super Kids?
Yeah, so we have a two-part initial consultation process, and that's the initial consultation where we do the full case history, and then I'll put together a treatment plan, and we go through that in the second consultation, the treatment plan consultation. Um, in that consultation, there may be the referral for the microbiome testing, if that seems like it's, you know, an urgent thing to need to happen straight away. Otherwise, yeah, you know, we can refer for that later down the track, like we were just talking about. But yeah, that two-part initial consultation process is how we what we start with.
Yeah. And so important, like I said earlier, like so we can determine what testing is going to be best, whether the gut microbiome testing is you know relevant and going to give us some you know helpful information
Yeah.
on a particular child. And I just want to say like the cobiome testing, which is the testing that we're sort of referring to, it's just so easy from a practitioner standpoint, isn't it, in terms of the results and how they're displayed. And I just think it's really, and for the patient as well, like you get some really clear like you know it's set up in graphs, and maybe we should do some sharing of some example test results on Instagram
They
over the
also
coming
have,
weeks.
yeah, and their practitioner support is really
Yes.
good. So if there's anything that we're unsure about as practitioners, we can reach out to them and
Mm.
get them to guide us through the results and just get a deeper understanding of what's
Yeah,
going
and I
on.
love it how they just kind of they put different markers together. So, you know, they'll put markers that will indicate things like, you know, intestinal inflammation together, or you know, how healthy the intestinal barrier, or markers that can kind of point to towards, you know, leaky gut and intestinal barrier kind of information and microbiome diversity. It's just
Yeah.
really clear and easy to look at for both
Mm,
practitioners and patients and
mm.
parents. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, awesome. So we do have a couple of questions that came from our members, our Natural Super Kids Club members, regarding testing. So let's get stuck into a couple of those. The first one was, I would love to know if the tests for allergies or intolerances, for example, dairy and gluten, or could explain underlying causes for ongoing diarrhea in young kids. What would you say to that one?
Okay. The test won't specifically test for intolerances or allergies, but it will give us information on, you know, some intestinal markers that might point to an underlying cause of the
Mm,
intolerances or allergies. Um, Ongoing diarrhea, I would be thinking about a pathogen,
mm.
and probably my first step in that case would be to do a fecal PCR from your GP. But
Mm,
it sort of depends on how long it's been going on for. Did it begin after exposure, like an overseas trip or exposure to tank water? If that was the case, then yeah, PCR from the GP would probably be the first step.
mm.
But yeah, that's where this you know, identifying the trigger and how long it's been going on for, we can gather from that initial consultation to better understand what's going on.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So to be clear, like the microbiome testing, you know, it won't pinpoint like there's an intolerance to gluten or dairy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you put that really well in terms of like our approach here at Natural Super Kids for allergies and intolerances is to kind of dig deep and look at what's going on in the gut that could have led to particularly intolerances and
Mm.
sensitivities. And yeah, the gut microbiome testing can be really helpful in that. And then I also just wanted to add, like, yes, first step PCR test from the GP. But if that comes back clear, it doesn't necessarily mean there's no pathogens present. So
Mm.
if that comes back clear, but there's still issues, then you know, the gut microbiome testing with the pathogen, because we'll talk about it in a moment, there's
The
different
different ones.
levels
Yeah.
with the pathogen testing would be a good next step. Would you agree with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So actually that leads well into our next question, which is, when I looked into it a few years ago, it was so expensive. Has it become more accessible cost-wise now? Yeah, do you want to talk to that a
Yeah.
bit?
So short answer is no. It's still definitely an investment. And I think this is something Brad brought up in his podcast as well. Just weighing up the financial
Mm,
reasons, you know, with days off work, with your kids being sick, and how that impacts your family finances as well. So I would consider that as a part of the whole, just considerations around spending the money. So the cobiome test starts at $329. That's for the basic testing. There's 3 different kinds of tests. So the basic one, it's $369, sorry. And that's just the functional gut microbiome. So it will give you an idea of diversity and species. The next one up from that is the Meta Explore GI, which is $489. And that gives some information about the gastrointestinal health markers as well as the microbiome profile, like the first one. And then the Meta Explore GI Plus is $529, which is both of those things: health markers, microbiome profile, and then the pathogen and parasite panels. So if you're suspecting there's some pathogens and parasites, that would be the one to go for, that more comprehensive testing. And prices do increase. So as of August 2024, it's these are the prices. But we can put a link to the website. So you can actually, the website's great in going into detail about what each test does, and how it might inform your decision around why you're wanting to test.
Yes, definitely. We'll make sure that link is in there because we just want to be straightforward about the testing prices. And so as you said, it is an investment, but if it can provide really good insights, and it can actually help guide treatment protocols so that we know exactly what we're dealing with, so that can help save money and time. And as you said, you do have to look at that bigger picture of like what is being unwell or your child being unwell kind of costing you in terms of financial and money. But it's one of the reasons we don't necessarily refer everyone for this testing, because we understand this is, it's a significant investment, particularly in, today's economy. And so we will we'll only test, when we do feel like it's going to offer some really valuable insights for the client.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the question about leaky gut. So someone said, might be a silly question, but is there a test for leaky gut in kids? I wanted to cover this because I think it's a big topic and lots of people wonder about this. So do you want to talk to that a bit?
Yeah, leaky gut can definitely be a part of what's going on in your kids, but I just wanted to say, because they have a certain condition, allergies, inflammation, it doesn't necessarily mean there's leaky gut. But in a lot of cases there are. The gold standard for leaky gut testing is a lactulose mannitol test. So that's taken orally, and then it's measured in the urine. So the metabolites of that are measured in the urine. So that's the gold standard. We can refer through one of our pathology companies for that, if that was something that you were interested in as well. But it doesn't come as a part of the microbiome testing.
Yes. And there can potentially be trickiness in terms of the application of that sort of test to kids, because they do have to drink something.
Yes.
And so, that can be tricky. And we will often, as practitioners, kind of, red flag leaky gut, and we'll be working on gut integrity with a lot of clients anyway, without any sort of test results.
And often, like, the therapies that we're using to support the gut for other reasons, or the skin, like zinc, LGG, prebiotics, vitamin A, they all work to help improve the integrity of the intestinal lining. So
yeah, and I did just want to also add that the gut microbiome testing that we're sort of talking about today can be helpful in terms of giving us some clues and hints when it comes to, intestinal integrity. Like, it can help pinpoint like certain microbes that can be used to assess the potential for the microbiome to like protect or impair intestinal barrier integrity. Like it doesn't give us a clear yes leaky gut or no leaky gut or anything like that, but it can give us some clues
Pointers,
as to how kind of robust the gut lining is.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much. I think we covered so much today. Is there anything else you want to add before we finish up, or let any listeners know about? Do you think we've covered everything?
I think we've covered everything. I think, like, I often think about, if there was one thing that I take away from a podcast that I've listened to, what is it? And I think, like, because we work mostly with mums and children, that you have, like, there is hope in, supporting your own health to benefit the health of your kids. So microbiome, diet, home environment, all the things we talk about at Natural Super Kids, doing for yourself will have a positive flow-on effect to your children. So I just wanted to, say that.
Yeah, that's a really good point to end on. And I think when you're caring for a child or multiple children or your family, it's so important that we look after ourselves as parents. So I love that little reminder. Thank you so much, Sarah. So anyone who is interested in gut microbiome testing for their child, I know we've talked about this already, but just to make it clear, the first step is to make an appointment with one of our naturopaths. So we offer online appointments, so it's super convenient. You can just tune in on Zoom from the comfort of your own home. I think it's obvious that we specialize in children's health, which is really important. And when it comes to gut microbiome testing, as I said, we talked about there's some limitations when it comes to kids. And I think there's some practitioners out there that, refer for testing when it's not going to be, that helpful in terms of the age of the child or what's going on for the child. So, I guess we're seeing and supporting kids and families all the time. And so when you do book in with a practitioner at Natural Super Kids, you are, guaranteed to get someone who is very knowledgeable and experienced, specifically when it comes to kids' health.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. And we will be back next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.